Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast, brought to you by InView, LawView's community for in-house legal professionals, where we dive into the heart of the legal profession to bring you unfiltered discussions with industry titans on a broad spectrum of topics.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast. I'm David Lancelot, the CLO and EVP Advocacy at LawView. I'm also an adjunct professor at the University of Florida College of Law, where I teach international in-house legal leadership. And I have to say, one of the people that I tell my students to absolutely know and read about is Sterling Miller. So I'm super excited to have him here today. Sterling is the CEO and Senior Counsel at Hilgers Graben, the law firm. Sterling, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you telling the students to check my stuff out. That's great. Thank you.
As you know, and I mean, I think this is the reason, and we'll get to this, why you started your 10 Things blog some time ago. There's very little when you look online, impactful and valuable information that is, I'd say, authentic and doesn't have an agenda. I think it's fair to say. And one of the most important, I think, resources is your 10 Things blog. So I absolutely tell my students this is a great place to start to get really valuable information about what it's like to really be in house and to have done that for quite a long time, right? So thank you so much for putting the effort in for all these years to do that.
Going on year 11. I can't believe it. So that's
Time
wild.
flies when you're having fun, mate.
Boy, doesn't it?
So I just want to tell the listeners how we sort of officially met. Obviously,
Yeah.
I've been a fanboy of yours for quite a long time, but we met via basically a meeting that you had. You were at I guess it's a client meeting for you and a customer meeting for us.
Yes.
The LawView team ran into you in what they described as a green room
The green room. Yes. That
at
was so
at
cool.
a shared awesome customer of ours and in Texas,
Yes.
and they said, "Man, you gotta meet this guy. It's Sterling Miller. He has this blog." And I was like, "Yeah."
My mom says that too. Exactly that way.
I don't know if my mom's watched this podcast yet, but she's certainly read your blog. I can tell you that.
Excellent.
So yeah, so they told me you should meet this guy, and I was like, "OMG, Sterling Miller, well done,
Wow.
guys, for making that connection." And yeah, and so we had a great conversation, and I was like, "Sterling, obviously huge fan, and would love to have you on the podcast." So
I'm
awesome
thrilled
to
to
have
be
you here
here.
today.
Yeah, great. Finally, glad we finally got to do it. Yeah, it was fun in the green room because you don't normally. I've sat in enough of those. You get a little small chit chat here and there, but we really started talking about the LawView product, about what I was doing, what the client was doing with the product, and I was so impressed. Not only did they say they're going to introduce me to you, I also got a demo of the product as well because it just sounded so fascinating to me, and it was. And in fact, it made my Cool Tech blog for 2024. So, congratulations to you.
Man, yes. And I gotta say that I'm super proud, to be in that blog, right? Like the only legal tech product that was in it for this year. And I dropped the mic right there.
Right there, it's over.
We're all
I've
good
got
now.
one
We've
now.
made it. Yeah. Yeah. Now I can tell my mom I work at a real company.
That's right.
Um,
Been
So
blogged.
yeah, no, that's super cool, and I've shared that you included us in the blog, and also I right before we started recording today, I was checking out your latest post, which I strongly recommend people read about problem solving in house, and it's got some great stuff in there. But I got to say, one of the things I really love is that sort of table that compares like in-house way of doing things versus business way of doing things, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
really
much
speaks
better.
to all the talks that I give and all the and that you give, I'm sure, and talking to students. It's just a wonderful summary, and maybe you could talk about how you came up with that one.
Yeah, so, interestingly, it was over the summer, and one of the young lawyers at the firm, we had a problem that they were trying to solve and didn't quite get there. And it was interesting because I was talking with our founder, Heather Hilgers, And I said, you know what? I don't think they know how to solve problems, because there were some basic things that were just missing. And then that's how a lot of things start with the blog. I just started thinking about, you know what? That was true as an in-house lawyer. It was very different than what I expected when I first went in-house. And I thought, well, I'll just put this on the list and I'll write about it. So it took a couple of months to get the slot. And the chart that you're talking about is really one of the things that I used a lot when I was an in-house lawyer. Those simple comparisons, not a long memo, not a bunch of footnotes. I'm not citing any treatises. It's just black and white. Here are some bullets. Makes it really easy to follow along in about 5 seconds. You get it right away and you're off and running. And that is one of the things for the 11 years or so I've been doing this blog that I've tried, hopefully in with some success, to explain to people that you really have to leave a lot of your lawyer skills at the door when you go in house, because it's different. Now those are important, but there are so many other things that you really have to learn and grasp and do it differently. And if you don't get that, then you're not going to be successful. But if you do, it's the best job in the world. Love being an in-house lawyer. Such a cool gig.
Ditto, ditto. And I maybe for the audience, and hopefully they will, quickly read that blog post because
Read
it's so
that
good.
blog.
But there is a footnote. No, there is a footnote to the table. So we're not leaving lawyering entirely behind, because we're footnoting our tables with valuable information that you can get to after you've gotten the.
It's debatable whether the footnotes are valuable, because that's where I like to put in
I'm not sure they were
some of the
blueberries.
weird thoughts that come to me when I'm writing things. But yeah, read the footnotes. They're always worth it in the blog for sure.
Yes. So I think your journey is a super interesting one, and it's worth talking about so the
Okay.
audience can get a feel for like how you got to where you are today, and I think why you're able to produce such authentically valuable and I'd say impactful content. So why don't you give us a feel for where you started out and how you got to in-house maybe to begin with.
Yeah. So I graduated from law school, Washington University in St. Louis, went to work, big law firm in St. Louis at the time. And that was the path. Being an in-house lawyer back then, this was a while ago, was not considered the best career path for most lawyers. It was kind of yeah, if you're putting your feet up or maybe you can't hack it, this is what you do. That has obviously changed dramatically over 30 years. And I was in the litigation section, started in the corporate section, but the litigation people were way cooler. So I got to move over after about a year, and I got to work with a lot of in-house lawyers. And one of the things that fascinated me is I would say, okay, here's what we think you should do. Here's some advice, whatever. And they would go, okay, great. Let me go run that back up the chain and I'll come and tell you what we want to do. And a couple of days would pass. They'd come back and say, okay, here's the plan. That was great, but I wondered what the hell happened when they ran that up the chain. How does that work? And that really got me interested in being an in-house lawyer. And I had recently gotten married, and my wife's from Dallas, which is where I am today. And we decided to move to Dallas to be by one of the sets of grandparents. My parents are in Nebraska still. Dallas seemed like more opportunity, and I ended up at American Airlines. I just threw some blind resumes out there, got the job in the litigation section, and loved it. But I started learning a lot of lessons right away, and some of those I talk about in the blog you just read, and a lot of those I talk about in past blogs or even in some of the books. Like, wow, this is very different than when I was working as an outside lawyer. American had a technology division called Sabre. Sabre automates travel agencies and airlines. And I was doing a lot of work for them, and I was asked to go help form, when they were spinning that company out, help form that legal department, which was a great opportunity because Americans' legal department is jammed with great talent. So this was an opportunity to get in on the ground floor. So I was doing that, And Sabre owned, it's like a Russian nesting doll. Sabre owned Travelocity, which is a travel website. They were partially spun off. They needed a general counsel, and they asked me if I would do that. And I said, well, that sounds like a lot of fun because I get to run my own legal team. And I reported to the CEO, had a tangential relationship to the GC, but I didn't report to the general counsel, which was both invigorating and scary as hell. But I learned a lot about what do the business people want from their lawyer. And it wasn't legal advice. That was expected. It was be a partner, be at the table, bring your viewpoint, help us think strategically, all these things that I was initially very frightened to do because it was the opposite of what they teach you in a law firm, which is give the client the legal advice, client makes a decision, rock on, we get paid no matter what. So this is very, very different than that. And I loved it. It was like being on the trapeze without a net. And I really enjoyed that. Sabre went private, so we rolled up the Travelocity and the Sabre legal team, and the GC retired. So I became general counsel at Sabre, and I did that for 7 or 8 years. Then we had an IPO. And that time, I had been there 20 years, and I had gotten some great advice. Whenever you have a zero in your career, in terms of years, I mean, not grades, but I got those too. When you have a zero at the end of a year, think about what you're doing, and is this really what you want to do? And after 20 years, I said, you know what? I can cash out. I can go do something different, and that's what I did. And I ended up doing some part-time work for Hilgers Graben, this law firm based out of Nebraska, which is, I knew the owners because we're both all from Nebraska, and it was a lot of fun. It was very different than what I had done at a law firm 20 years earlier. But then I got the call to go back in house at a technology company called Marketo, based in Silicon Valley. I took that opportunity, and it was great. Actually, I'd been writing the blog now for some time, and it was weird going back in house, thinking, all right, I have to actually live the stuff that I've been writing about. And that was interesting. Most of it was true. Some of it had changed a little bit, but you adapt like everybody does. But I also got to write in real time. One of the first ones I did when I went back in house was, how do you do a budget? Because I was doing the budget and I'm whiteboarding all this stuff and I'm asking people questions, and I go, wow, this would be a great blog. No one teaches you how to do this. I just learned this the hard way, like most people do. We sold that company to Adobe after a couple years, and I had a choice: stay in house, which was really, really compelling, or the law firm was knocking, come back to the law firm. And there's something special about Hilgers Graben, and I wanted to get in on that ground floor. That's a recurring theme. It's an opportunity to start something, to be part of something. And everything I thought would happen has happened. It's really exploded. I'm now the CEO, so I run all the day-to-day stuff. I still practice law. We're the largest female-owned law firm in the world, which is really amazing. And I love coming to work every day. And I get to work with a lot of in-house lawyers, just like I did 30 years ago. So it's been a lot of fun. But that's my path. That's how I got here today.
Oh, yeah, and obviously there's a ton there, Sterling. But I think like right at the end, I would put a sort of, I don't know, pin, exclamation point, whatever you want to call it, on this idea of law firms having a much better understanding these days, I think, of the value of that in-house experience. And I've seen that in multiple firms. I mean, the good ones, right? The ones that I would work with are bringing people back and saying,
Yeah,
wow, you've got 10, 15, 20, whatever years experience as a GC or as a senior lawyer in-house. And how different that is from when you talked about the early days, right? Um, because I
absolutely.
absolutely remember the early days. I was in London, and it was sort of like, oh, so you want to take a kind of a break, or you're not
Yes.
smart enough to be
You
up
don't
at
want to work
3
hard.
a.m. Yeah,
Right.
you
All
don't want
that.
to work hard, and you're probably not as smart as us. So you want to go in-house where everything's super chilled out. And then of
Right.
course you go in-house and you're like, I actually knew it wasn't going to be chilled out. I'd already worked in business, but like how ridiculous it sounds to tell an in-house lawyer that somehow it's less intense
Yes.
um, in an
They
in-house
will
role.
they will
Uh,
punch you in the face if you try to tell them that. And you're right about law firms figuring that out. There are a lot of former in-house lawyers migrating to law firms, certainly over the last few years. Some of that is because law firms are smarter and are going, these are people that we want to hire to help bridge those gaps. But a lot of it is also the demands have changed so dramatically on the in-house lawyers, um, that it's almost harder than working at a law firm. And you're, well, hey, if I'm going to work a lot of hours, maybe I'll just go get paid for it in a way that I'm not getting paid by the company. And I think you're seeing that a little bit more, that stress and that burnout having an impact. But I still think once you get an in-house lawyer um, job in your blood, it's really hard. It's really hard to walk away, because not because of the legal issues, which are always fun, dynamic, changing. It's the relationships you build with the business. It's being part of the decision making process. And if you can be part of a successful business, I don't know, there's some adrenaline kick that you get to being part of that, and that's addictive and a
yeah,
lot of fun. A lot of fun.
absolutely. Well, I would call that being on the team, right? As opposed to, you were talking about, you send something in, it goes up the chain, it comes back. I've always felt like I don't like being outside of the team looking in, whether that's as, and I've been a contractor at multiple companies. It's sort of like you're not fully invited to the dance, um,
In the parking
and
lot.
you're not invited to the celebration that happens after. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
um,
That's very true. And I think in the early days when I was in house, it was a bit of a cave. Legal was separate. Legal was a place you went maybe when you were in trouble or going to get scolded. You didn't just walk in because you wanted to shoot the breeze with the legal department. That has changed. And a lot of lawyers are now embedded directly in the middle of the business, even if not as the department as a whole, but just separated out. And I think that is exciting and very refreshing and much more interesting than just sending out emails from in the deep, dark recesses of the basement. And it's way better to be on the team, part of the team, and have them want you to be part of the team because you're bringing something to them that maybe they don't have otherwise. So lawyers are great dealing with ambiguity. We're very good at communicating, organizing, making sure things get done, things get followed up on. And you think everyone's like that in a business, and they're not. And when they realize that those skills exist, that becomes part of the pulling of the lawyers into non-legal situations, which again, I think is the fun part of being an in-house lawyer. It's also very time consuming, but you have to pick your poison, so to speak. And I think lawyers just really bring something fantastic to businesses. And you're seeing that also with what used to be just the general counsel role. Now it's the chief legal officer, which may have communications, HR, facilities, government relations, all kinds of things that aren't purely legal, because they're just really talented. And some of those people even move in to be CEOs or presidents of companies, because lawyers, you just have such a flexible and valuable skill set that you can bring to the table, which again, all makes it really really interesting.
and I think what we're seeing, and the way I talk about that, and I think you talk about it in the same, maybe using different language, but there's a sort of transformation taking place, and it's over time. We and especially you have been fortunate enough to see it from its early days in what I think of as a pretty young profession, um, go from that sort of siloed, separate from the business, almost trying to mimic the private practice way of operating, to
Yeah,
a much more integrated, um, business people and business leaders with legal skills approach, that I think is almost now. I think we're relatively close. In some sectors, it's already there, but we're relatively close to it being a, like, it's an expectation that for in-house lawyers, they are at the table, they are strategic operators, they do understand the business's objectives, and they drive the business, as opposed to the sort of old model of spot mitigate risk. Guess what? Nobody wants you in the room
No
kind
one,
of way of
no one
operating.
does. Yes, you are absolutely 1000% correct. That is been one of the shifts. And I wrote a book a couple years ago called "Showing the Value of the Legal Department." And the very first chapter talks about these different stages, at least that I have been able to see from what I call the dark ages way back when to lawyers as leaders. And you're right, you're now a business person who happens to have legal skills as your primary tool set, but not your only tool set. And when you think of yourself as a business person, bringing what your skills are to help the business succeed, it's a very different outlook, a very different way of looking at the job than 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And I speak to a lot of in-house lawyers from outside the United States in areas where the in-house profession is really starting to just take off. Africa, which is a really exciting, dynamic market, the Middle East, and South America. And it's fun because you can see they are where we were 10 or 15 years ago, right? Very much, I came from a law firm. I'm running this like a law firm, but they want me to do, it's very uncomfortable, Sterling. They want me to do all this stuff. And how do you help them get over that hump and go, that's where the good stuff is. That's where you want to be. And that's where the biggest value is when you can think of yourself as a business person with that skill set and not just a lawyer mitigating risk, because if that's all you're doing, you're just pointing out problems and that's not solving them. It's just a solving that's really fun, and you learn to do that in a different way.
Yes. Well, I the book is called, once again, Showing the Value of the Legal Department. Is that right?
That's right. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
But that's
Just for
not the
the
most
listeners
recent.
to
The
go
most
now,
recent
and
is yeah, you can go get it now. It's on Amazon.
I'm definitely getting it. I mean, that sounds like a fantastic read to me. I love the fact that there are now. I mean, and of course, you're one of the longest standing sort of, I don't know, thought leaders, luminaries in this space, right? Sort of leading a movement, I'd say, to bring the profession that we both love from a place of almost, as you said, exile in the basement to being at the top table and being strategic operators. And it's great that there's content out there that you can say, hey, Sterling wrote a book about this, right? Sterling was on a podcast about this. Have you checked out Sterling's blog? There are people that talk about this, and there are more and more now. And I think this transformation is actually accelerating as we build a shared almost vocabulary, a nomenclature around what the role is, what the in-house role is, and what great looks like. I think is
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really great observation. Yeah, when I first started writing this blog, there were a couple things that were the genesis of it. But one was no one was writing about this. No one was writing about what it was like to be an in-house lawyer. You would get law firm alerts, which are okay, but they really stop before they give you the answer because they want you to call them. I get that. That makes perfect sense. But give me something practical from someone who's actually sat in the chair and lived it. Boy, that was hard to find. And now I always get excited in December. So I do a cool tech blog in August or September, and then every December at the end of the year, it used to be blogs that in-house lawyers should read. And blogs are still around, but there's LinkedIn, there's podcasts, there's all kinds of content out there by a whole new generation of in-house lawyers. And if I've had even a speck of, I guess, encouragement for that group, then that's awesome, because they write about things that I don't even know about, because they see it from a very different perspective. There are lots of great women writers out there. Certainly not a viewpoint I can do, just biologically limited. But I love reading those different perspectives. And I think there's so much out there now. It's even harder to curate it, right? Like what should I be reading, because there's so many different things out there, and I try to spotlight things that I think are really useful, but there's so much you just leave on the table. Hopefully we'll get to that later, but I always like to encourage that and find, 3 or 4 people that you really like, maybe because of a general blog or a general series like mine, or very specific. The people who write about contracts, contract nerds, how to contract, for example, fantastic. There's stuff on artificial intelligence and chat GPT, how to use that as an in-house lawyer. All of those really more specific things are worth your time as well. And I love LinkedIn. I refer to it frequently as the last bastion of sane conversation in social media. So I love participating there because you just don't get the weirdness that you get everywhere else. I think we could all do without a little less weirdness. So I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I hope it never changes. Probably will, but I hope for now, at least it doesn't. And I enjoy writing to that audience, and I enjoy finding new writers. And there's more. They're coming out every day, so it's always worth taking a peek.
Absolutely, yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more about sort of the transformation is taking place at different speeds in different sort of sectors, business industries, and geographies, right? Like, it's absolutely the case that I speak to, and it's not necessarily, I think, you go to somewhere in Europe and everyone's behind, right? It's more you go somewhere in the United States and they're in a particular sector that has been quite traditional over time, maybe because of the industry they're in, and it's more stable. There's not a lot of change. There's not a lot of technology, whatever, and they're operating in a way that we've seen in this evolution. Um,
Yes.
and I and I think it's super interesting that you're speaking to people outside of the United States to do what I would call push the industry forward, right? Evolve things and maybe even accelerate that evolution.
Yeah, it's a lot like I've always envied, some countries that didn't build their infrastructure like we did in the United States, which is over 200 years or so, right? And then you have some countries that, you know what, we're just starting fresh, so here's our 6G internet system that's ready to go, and that's it. They don't have 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 or telephones or telegraphs. They never did that, and they have that ability to accelerate right to the current most modern version. And you see that, I think, with in-house lawyers. I get that a lot. I just had a request, it was late last week, I think, to translate the blog into Arabic in the kingdom in Saudi Arabia. And I love that. I go, please send me a copy. I will not be able to read it, but I want to see what it looks like in Arabic. And I think it's so fascinating that you get to do that. And in the US, I think there's more of that happens with the startups and the younger companies where they don't have the legacy, where, legal department has always been set up this way. We've always done things this way. And that inertia is incredibly powerful. It can be both really positive because it means it works and you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but it could also really be a drag on innovation that someone hiring their first lawyer, one of the reasons I wrote the books and I write the blog is whenever my time is done writing this, and I'm not sure when that'll be, but it'll happen at some point. You could take all the stuff that I've written, pick it up, and you could run a legal department from start to finish without having to do anything else other than just read this guy's stuff. And that's my goal. And if you do so, you're going to be at the end, meaning the most fresh stuff, than dealing with the way it used to be done 30 years ago or 20 years ago even. So that's exciting to watch, and it's happening all over the world, which is really
Yeah,
amazing.
absolutely. Well, and I think it's fascinating that you mentioned the Middle East because we have a surprising number of really advanced in-house legal customers at LawView in the UAE. And
Yes.
one of the guys, Zaid Gardner, the GC of Property Finder out there, he's one of the people that actually referred me to LawView because they were already using the
Wow.
product, and I was
Wow.
just like,
Yeah.
I didn't realize how advanced that market was and is, and even I mean, Bjarne Tellman, he's out there, working at Aramco now, right? So like
Yes.
this transformation is actually happening everywhere, and it's just a matter of, I think, having these sort of thought leaders get involved and really push things forward, and having people like you who can give that little extra, look, somebody who's well known, who's an expert, who's very credible, can give that little push and get the team on board, and maybe get the GC on board too.
Well, the interesting thing about being an expert, quote unquote, is it's all based on failure. I mean, everything I
Indeed.
write about, like, don't do this, is because I did that. I was the person insisting that, basically legal ran the business. You have to listen to us no matter what we tell you. You have to do it. Obviously, not going to get very far with that. Lots of lessons learned over, boy, I've got to edit everything in this contract. It has to be perfect, even though it's a non-disclosure agreement that should take 15 minutes, right? But I'm going to spend an hour on it because I want to change the word choice. So you learn those lessons over time, and you know what? This is a much better thing. It's like, hopefully, I guess I could compare it to maybe the day I realized that my parents were basically right, and all the stuff that I would go, oh my God, you don't know anything, blah blah blah. And one day you wake up and go, oh, my life would have been so much easier if I just followed their advice. But you have to learn it on your own. So I'm trying to give you that path, but still, people will still do the things that all people do. They'll make mistakes, which is great. Mistakes are where you learn. Mistakes are where you become the person that you ultimately are going to be. And encouraging mistakes and learning from mistakes. A lot of companies talk about that. It's rare that you find leaders who actually believe in that, and will not punish you for making a mistake. Because if you feel like I'm going to be punished for making a mistake, well, what are you going to do? You're going to fall back on the tried and true. You're just going to do the same old crap because no one can yell at you if you're doing it like everybody else does. No one can yell at you if you hire the top 5 law firm, because even though they may not be the best fit, boy, everybody's heard of mega firm X or mega firm Y. Getting out of that mentality, fixing that mentality, that's a real challenge. And I've always tried to find that balance between, yeah, there are things you don't want to throw out. You don't have to do them differently, but always ask why. Why are we doing things this way? Why is this the way it is? And sometimes the answer would be obvious because it really works, or sometimes it may be, you know what, it doesn't work. It doesn't work as well as it did. Can we try something different? Can we try something new? And that's what I really got excited about. And so many people have worked for me or worked with me. And I was the mad scientist. I was always coming up with all kinds of crazy stuff, and a lot of it bombed. And then we say, okay, let's don't do that anymore. That was terrible. But every once in a while, yeah, hey, you know what? There's some gems here. You keep those. Everything else goes, and you keep moving forward. So I apologize to everyone who had to deal with me, because I always, we can do it differently. Let's come up with something.
Absolutely. Well, learning requires making mistakes for sure,
It
and
does, absolutely.
it's just one of those things that we're absolutely, as lawyers, trained not to do. Right?
Yes,
Like, don't make mistakes.
train not to do
Don't
it.
try new things. Be scared of risk. Do things the way they've always been done, like it says in the precedent,
Precedent,
etc.
common law, just incremental development over time.
Yeah. So maybe it strikes me, Sterling, that you probably have as much experience as anybody in this space, coming into a role or working with people who are in roles where they need to help this transformation move along, right? From whatever stage it's at now to the modern way of operating that I think we can agree is a good model, or even a great model for how our relatively new profession should operate. So do you have any advice, counsel, based on your years of making mistakes, for people who are in that spot, whether they're the junior person looking to help transform the organization, or maybe the more senior person who's got to convince, maybe a CEO who's worked with a predecessor GC or something like that, to show the value of the function?
Yes. Boy, well, 3 things kind of jump out, David, as I think about that. So number one, learn the business. And I don't mean just know we make cars or we make widgets or whatever it is, but who are the decision makers? What are the internal politics? How do things get done? Who are our customers, competitors, the marketplace? You cannot be successful, especially if you're trying to do things the new way or a different way, if you're not curious about the company that you work for. So really try to get into the guts of what is going on around you. Yeah, I worked for a lot of technology companies. First thing I would do, give me a demo. I want to see what the customer sees at the product. How does it work? How do we make money? If you don't know those things, it's hard to be effective as a lawyer. Number two, as much as I did not want to do this, I had to learn some math. I had to learn some basic finance, uh, balance sheet, cash flow statement, P&L, all the little, CAGR, which I thought was really a cool deal, turned out to be something very different than what I was thinking. But you have to have at least a working knowledge. You don't have to be an MBA, but you have to have a working knowledge of that. You have to, because the language of business is numbers, and if you can't speak it at least partially, you're not gonna make it. And then the thing that I think really makes a huge difference for in-house lawyers is go and talk to the business. It is so easy these days to hide behind the computer screen, to send a Slack or a Teams message or an email, but that just going and talking to people, what impacts your day? Are the things that we can do in the legal department that can help you? Are there things that we are doing that are hindering you? What can we do differently? What can I do better? What can I do to be a better partner? And that was one of the other things that I would do when I would start in a new role. Is I just go talk to as many business people as would be willing to talk to me. And to be honest, no one ever said no. And I learned so much about the business, about them, but inevitably, I think this has changed, but they would say, "Wow, you're the first lawyer who's ever asked me that," which I just was stunned that no one had gone to them and said, "Tell me about your neck of the woods. How does it work here? How do what do you see coming down the road? Are there things we need to be planning on doing in the legal department? I mean, yeah, we're going to go into these new markets. If I don't know that and I'm the general counsel and all of a sudden, hey, we're announcing tomorrow we're going into this market. If I had been paying attention or asked, maybe I would have known it a year ago. I could have planned for, do we need that resource internally? Do I need someone who speaks a foreign language? Do I need local counsel on the ground? Those are things you gain when you actually spend time talking to the business. So learn the business, get some background in numbers, and go talk to people. It really makes a huge difference, not only in your success, but how they perceive the legal department. Because if they think favorably of you, then generally they think favorably of the legal department. And if it's the opposite, they don't like you or think you're not a really good lawyer, that impression is for everybody. So that marketing of the legal department is something that you really have to be cognizant of and aware of and do every day. We had when I was general counsel, was always be marketing, ABM, right? We were always finding ways to let people know, hey, here's what we're doing in the legal department. Here's how we're helping. Here's how we're part of the team. Keeping that top of mind. So those are some things that just jump out at me in terms of making that transition.
Fantastic, fantastic. I'm going to poach that little snippet there and make sure everyone in my class listens to that 100%. I think wise words, really wise words. Building rapport with the business people, having an understanding of, I can totally remember, walking the halls of various eBay offices, encountering people on my team and saying, "How's the business doing?" And if they said, "Well, it's great, CAGR's up by X%, compound annual growth rate for anyone
Yes,
who's interested.
yes, he wants to know what that is. It's very
A really
important, apparently.
valuable way of thinking about the business, right? And if they could say that, that's awesome and have a great day. And if they said, "Well, I don't actually know what the revenue is," the next thing we did was go into a meeting room, and now probably go into a whatever video conferencing room,
Right.
and have a conversation, because I don't want people who are on my team and representing our function to be in conversations, unfortunately, a bit too much like some of the private practice lawyers who I used to deal with, where it's sort of like, "Oh, you've got an issue. What do you guys do again?"
Yes. Yeah.
Um, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Which
It's amazing.
clearly does not happen with your firm because you're there, and I think that's one of the reasons you're there.
We do spend a lot of time learning what the clients do. Helps for many
Yeah,
ways. Yes.
in a million ways, in a million ways, and maybe it's worth having a quick, like the transformation of how law firms operate these days. I think there was a model, and there still is a model, probably for the vast majority of firms, which is just like we wait by the phone. And when we have to react to something,
Yes.
we start the hourly billing. Whereas, that's basically the opposite of the modern in-house model, which is a proactive. Um, we're looking over the horizon, trying to figure out what we can avoid and eliminate, so
Yes.
that it never comes on the radar. But how do you think now is sort of like, I'd say, cutting edge private practice about how you work with customers? And I mean, we've literally seen you working with customers. That's how we ended up here today. But maybe tell us how you think about that.
Well, first of all, learning their business. It seems pretty basic, but you're absolutely right. Lots of conversations I remember having with long-term outside law firms. So what do you guys do? How does this work? Every once in a while you get someone who would say, I would like to come out, learn more about your business. Great. Welcome that. Don't bill me for it, right? No, the smart ones never would. So learning about the business of the clients that you have, and then if you're trying to bring in a new client, spend a little time understanding what they do. If you, I mean, there's so much information now, even about the people you're going to meet with. You can easily go on LinkedIn and find out two or three things about this person, so you're not starting the lunch or the meeting or whatever with, so tell me what the company does, which is not a good start anymore, because it's like, really, you were too lazy to go read the annual report or look us up on LinkedIn or just do a basic search. So that's number one. Number two, ask the client what they want. By what I mean by that, if the client calls you or emails you and says, hey, I have this issue, and you don't clarify, do you want a memo? Do you just want an email? Do you want me just to call you? What is it that would be the most helpful? What law firms tend to fall back on, if you've worked at a law firm, big law firm, swarm it, guys. 5 people, all kinds of research, 50-page memo, goes over to the client, and then you have this isn't what I wanted. You're fighting over the bill, a lot of wasted time. You can shortcut that if you just ask them, what do you want? And if you're the client, don't be bashful about telling the outside law firm, I don't want a memo. I only want one person working on this. I don't want to spend more than 3 hours. They'll tell you, we can do that. These are the limitations, and you can agree or work something out, and they'll be happy to do that. But having that conversation about what the expectation is, in terms of the work, really makes a huge difference. And then the most important, being responsive. And I hear this story all the time. In fact, one of the ways that our firm has grown, and I can tell you, it usually starts with a story where I can't get them to return my phone calls. I don't know where my case is. I don't know where this is. Or they send me a summary judgment motion the night before it's due and ask me to look at it, but they have to file it in the morning. I mean, I had no heads up. I didn't know this was coming, and I have no time to do it. And that happened when I was an in-house lawyer. It still happens today, and it just boggles my mind that any law firm would operate that way unless they just don't give a shit. Right? Like, yeah, we don't care. If you don't want to pay us, someone else will. We're just waiting by the phone. Someone's going to call us with all their legal needs, and we're going to take care of it. And there are probably some firms where that is true, but I think that's becoming less and less true. And that puddle of people willing to pay $3,000 an hour for the partner and all 7 people that partner brings with them is shrinking. And for me, that's an opportunity. We have, this isn't meant to be an ad for the firm. We have the same quality people. In fact, we hire them from big law. we just give them a different way to practice, and we give our clients a different experience. And I think the firms that are figuring that out are the ones that are going to thrive and grow over the long term. And that's what clients want. That's what I wanted. I just wanted someone to tell me, hey, this is due next week. When do you need it? We will get this to you when you need it, Sterling, because you are paying us a god awful amount of money. Tell us what you want. And if they didn't do that and they made my life miserable, guess what? First opportunity I had, I'm chucking them. I'm just not going to, and I'm not even going to tell you that I'm firing you. I'm just not going to use you. And then you're going to wake up after 6 months and go, you know what? We haven't gotten a single project from Marketo or Sabre or Travelocity in 6 months. Sterling, what's going on? Nothing. He's got, some other firms we're trying. I'm not going to tell you. You screwed the pooch. Maybe I will. I probably would now because I'm older. But then I just say, well, if you're too, thinking if you're too stupid to figure this out, then I really made the right choice in sending my work somewhere else. That's how it happened. So if you're an outside lawyer listening to this podcast, don't do that. Do the proactive, be a partner with the client. If the client wants to talk about the bill, don't be afraid to talk about the bill. They want to pay you. They may have questions. Okay, welcome the questions. And if it's not exactly what the client wants, you can figure out a way to get there one way or another. You'll be able to do that. It's the firms that just say, you know what? No, we don't do that. We don't care. Go somewhere else. Literally, just go somewhere else. Okay, we'll go somewhere else. So that's what I see.
Yeah. No, and I couldn't agree more. I think, as you said, the puddle is shrinking. And the firms that aren't keeping up with that transformation are going to get left behind and one day wake up wondering, where did all
Yeah.
the work go? How come we've only got, 30-year partners here and nobody wants to join our firm? We don't understand how to innovate, and we don't. I think there's something to our training as well. Maybe this is part of the indoctrination, where you'd think that as a counselor, we'd be great listeners, but
Yes.
lawyers are
Terrible.
terrible listeners. They
Yeah.
they love talking and telling people how smart they are,
Mm.
but they're
Yes.
very bad, I find, external counsel in particular, at saying, I see you think you have a legal problem. You don't have a legal problem, you have a business problem. And we're
Yeah.
here to help you solve that business problem and accelerate your business. Now, let's talk about your business goals, right? Your objectives as an organization. And, it's people like you at law firms that I have the confidence in to partner with in that regard, rather than somebody who spent 40 years, writing memos.
Doing it the old way. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Makes a huge, huge difference. Another thing that we're seeing, I think you're seeing this more and more with the younger lawyers. It's hard if you work at a firm where I'm a fourth year lawyer and my rate's $900 an hour. There's not many people I know that are going to pay $900 an hour. I can't build a book of business if that's my rate. I can work on your stuff, 40-year partner, because you have Megacorp as a client and they don't care. But for me, I can't go to my natural peer group and develop business when there are so many other firms out there that have the same quality and are significantly less expensive. And that's another opportunity, certainly for firms like ours and for others, is, hey, come over here to the fun side first. That law firm model is really interesting. It hasn't changed a lot in 60 or 70 years. There's the top of the pile. There's this weird equity partnership deal with points and guaranteed payments that really distort everything that the law firm does, and they can't turn it around. It's the Titanic. It has hit the iceberg, man. It is sinking. And Leonardo DiCaprio is not getting on that door. He's sinking to the bottom. And they also hire a gob of associates with the expectation that maybe 10% will make it to the end. Everybody else, you are planned to be exterminated. And you may say, okay, that's fine. I'm going to work for a few years. I'm going to make a lot of money. They're going to get a lot of hours out of me. Then I'll go do something different. But if you're walking in there thinking, yay, I'm one of this group here, I'm one of the elite, and I'm going to be a partner someday, odds are very low that's ever going to happen, and that you're going to build a book of business with these ridiculous rates. So we like to just offer a different lifestyle and a different way of approaching both clients and the people that work at our firm. And I really enjoy being part of that, running it like a business, which is like running an in-house legal department. You have to run it like part of the business. Those skills all just transfer over. So starting to see that a lot as well.
Yeah, and I mean, that's fascinating to hear, and I'm really glad that the profession is going that way because I think too many people have been through the grinder, and that grinder may have worked a few years ago, but clearly doesn't now. And I actually think one of the reasons for that is how technology has evolved,
Yes.
which has sort of been almost like a partner in this transformation of our profession, right? Like the way I talk about it, and maybe maybe I'm totally off base. You've seen more of this than I have, but we've had the evolution of the other functions in the business. So you've got the finance team, the HR team, I mean even sales and marketing, where they went from being sort of back office, a lot of manual processes, not a lot of time to be at the table doing the strategic work, going to the offsites and having the valuable rapport building coffees, to a situation where each of those teams has technology that allows them to get a lot of the sort of repetitive, reactive, low value work off their plates, and they can spend more time partnering with the CEO, to the point where the CFO is now pretty much the co-CEO, right? Like
Yes.
they
In
had
most business.
SAP, whatever, 30 years ago, and they've just gotten more and more and more and more strategic. Whereas the HR team got Workday 10, 15 years ago, and they've just gotten more and more and more and more strategic. And now legal, I feel like, is at that similar sort of inflection point, right?
Yeah.
Where,
I absolutely agree, and it's an interesting dichotomy between outside law firms and inside law firms. Outside law firms like technology that helps them do their job. So Lexis, Westlaw, I can research cases, I can find statutes. In-house lawyers like technology that can help me do my job faster, which is the antithesis really of what the outside law firm wants, because the billable hours, I make more money the more time I spend. And I'm not saying it's deliberate or intentional that, oh, I'm going to try to pad this, but the incentive is wrong. The incentive for an outside law firm is don't do anything that's going to necessarily reduce the number of hours that you can bill, unless you change the economics, which would be a flat fee or some type of alternative fee, which they're out there, but they're not really very good at it yet. Whereas in-house, I want technology because I don't have to do crap. If I can have this tool do this and I don't have to do it, that's awesome, because now I can work on something else. So your whole incentive from a technology standpoint is, how can I save time? How can I spend less time? And also, and this is where the smart in-house lawyers are, how can I show the business that I'm cutting edge? I am running legal like a business, because if they see, I mean, I remember doing bills, they were paper bills. I was doing paper invoices, and my finance team's going, well, don't you have an invoice tool? I go, no, I don't, because you won't approve it. but, but when they did finally, all the time we would spend looking at paper just went away. All the data that we would extract manually and put into spreadsheets, typing it in, went away. And now the technology's out there, and I put, LawView in my cool tech for 2024. I mean, the array of tools that are available, from contract drafting to management of contract to data analysis, all of that is making the in-house lawyer's job easier, and it's what the business wants to see. And one of the first things I remember really just hitting home is, Sterling, we need you to start bringing a dashboard to the C-suite meetings about legal. I'm like, what's a dashboard? What are you talking about? I had to go figure out what the hell this was, and I went, oh my God, what am I going to do? But then I did what I think again, smart in-house lawyers and smart general counsel is you have to be humble in this job. And that is another thing that lawyers aren't good at. Listening, you're dead on, learning how to listen, but also not pretending like you know everything. I would find who in the hell in the finance team is doing their dashboards. You're my new buddy. I'm going to take you to lunch. I'm going to whatever. You're going to show me how to do this. And the fact that the general counsel of the company would come to someone, 5 or 6 levels below and go, could you help me? I would really appreciate it. That person feels awesome because, wow, a C suite person is asking me to help them. But it starts with realizing, yeah, I could pretend and probably come up with some clunky ass dashboard that everyone's going to laugh at. Or I could do something super slick with Tableau and his other things if I just get someone to help me learn how to do it. And that's what I always did. I always would, hey, explain Kager to me. Obviously, I have the wrong idea what this is. How does this work? And being humble enough to do that makes a huge difference in your ability to be successful and to adopt technology, which generally lawyers aren't good at adopting technology. They're not comfortable with it. But I think in-house lawyers are way more comfortable than outside lawyers, and they also have a real incentive to do so. You don't necessarily see that on the outside. So that whole new wave of technology, including Chat GPT, I wrote a book, my most recent book that came out earlier this summer on productivity, was supposed to come out either at the end of last year or the very beginning of 24. And I was writing it and Chat GPT comes out. And I thought, yeah, this is just a fad. I'm not going to worry about Chat GPT. But as I'm writing, I'm paying attention to it. And all of a sudden I go, oh, wait a minute, I got to stop writing and I have to go figure out what the heck this is because I think this feels like it's going to be important. And it is. So I had to spend about 3 months learning how to use artificial intelligence, and it just blew me away. So I have a whole chapter in the book on generative AI and all the different tools and what you can do. How do you write prompts? How do you use this in a way that makes sense for in-house lawyers, but that would never make sense for most outside lawyers, the way that you're going to use it because you're trying to get things off your plate, not spend time on it. And that's the opposite of what the incentives are outside. So that technology, that whole new wave of technology is incredible to me. And I was there when fax machines were cool. When I first got out of law school, we couldn't believe you could send a piece of paper, jam it in this machine and send it. And we were thinking, wouldn't it be cool if you could, send a, do research on, we had these really primitive Lexis and Westlaw terminals that only did Lexis or only did Westlaw. But if you could email, or not, we didn't know what email was, you could send that case electronically like a fax to someone in a different city. And now, so we were Fred Flintstone in a very George Jetson world. It's been fascinating to see it.
It's such a good time for people to be coming into the profession, or for people to be like doing a transformational sort of project, whatever you want to call it, in their legal function, because the technology now has matured enough,
It's caught
right?
up.
There's still plenty of room, and it's going to get better and better, but I think it's matured enough that we can now make the move to something that's intuitive, that's comprehensive, that's dynamic, that's a lot more like what our peers in the different functions in the
Yeah.
business have. And as you were saying about the people you were talking to in different geographies, sort of leapfrog the legacy stuff that we had to deal with, right? Like the disparate, hard to use sort of enterprise systems that required,
Nothing
30
integrated.
man hours of dev time,
Yeah.
um, to change a button, right? Now it's
Yeah.
just drag and drop.
Drag
I
and
know how
drop.
to use it. It's on my phone, right? And I think it's actually a really really good time to say, um, I want to do things the modern way, and I need a tool that allows me to do that, right?
Yeah.
Instead
It
of the
easily
previous.
allows me to do that. Yeah. That's a really excellent point, David, because I remember in 2018, there were a couple of AI tools that were available. LawGeeks, Legal Sifter. There were a few others. These are all around contracts. And what I told my team when I went to the CFO and I said, I want to find one of these AI tools that will do the following. It will, if we get customer paper, which is the bane of every in-house lawyer's existence, the other side's paper, even though it's your product, you're going to work off their paper. It would look at that. It would take our playbook or our standard form, and it would do the first draft of red lines. If we could find that, that's amazing. It's going to save a ton of time. And then I want to find this in the same tool. It can look at red lines to our paper and tell me if they're acceptable or not. So we're calling around, we're talking to people, we're doing demos. Everyone's going, oh yeah, we can do that. No one could do it, not at that time. And you might get a little bit of stuff with non-disclosure agreements, which again, we weren't going to spend thousands of dollars on a tool for NDAs. But now with ChatGPT, I mean, it's here, and it's good. It's getting better, and it's going to be tremendous. And I don't think it's going to replace in-house lawyers. It's just going to make your job so much easier, and you're going to be able to spend time doing those counseling tasks, those strategic partner tasks, and not, God, what is this red line? I gotta go through all this. That just is so time consuming. If that can be automated, which it is getting there, wow, that's fantastic. And stuff like LawView or other tools where you have a contract management stuff. I can remember looking at contracts for due diligence. I need to find all the contracts that have the no assignment provision. And you're flipping pages. It's like Raiders of the Lost Ark, and you're in this room full of documents. And now I just want to find out. 5 seconds later, I have a list of all the contracts that have it. That is amazing to me, and that you're absolutely right. Adopting that, having that is a leapfrog to the front of the line, and get comfortable with it, adopt it, embrace it, because it's going to make your life easier. It's going to make your life better. It's going to make the department more valuable.
Absolutely. Well, Sterling, I mean, I have many more questions for you.
Yeah, we'll have to do part 2.
I'll reserve for your guest speaker slot in my class, which I haven't told you.
Yeah, I'm in. Yeah,
I'm totally having you come in because it's going to be so valuable there. And hopefully we'll be seeing each other soon in person. I would love to get to Texas soon, and and I hope you have a great rest of the week, and thank you everybody for being here, listening to this conversation. I'm still kind of gobsmacked that Sterling was able to join us. So thank you so much, Sterling, for being here. And everybody, we'll see you on the next Legal Leaders podcast. Thank you for being here.
If you enjoyed listening, please hit follow and leave us a review on your listening platform of choice. We love engaging with our community and hearing from you, so please head to inview.lawview.com. Thank you so much for tuning in.